Sundar Pichai handled humiliation with grace, while Narendra Modi stood beside him. The hall was silent, filled with people from across the world. Cameras flashed, reporters whispered, and leaders sat on polished chairs under bright lights. In the middle of the stage stood Sundar Pichai, calm but uneasy. Beside him was Narendra Modi, who watched everything with a steady expression. The moment felt heavy, as if everyone was waiting for something to break. And then it happened. A man from the audience stood up, his voice sharp, his words filled with anger. He spoke about Sundar's background, mocking his childhood, questioning his worth, and trying to humiliate him in front of thousands. The words cut through the air like knives. The crowd shifted uncomfortably, unsure how Sundar would respond. For a moment, Sundar lowered his eyes. His memories flashed back to a small house in Chennai, where his parents worked hard to give him a simple life. He remembered how his father carried him on a scooter to school, how his mother managed the home, with little money, and how books were his only treasure. He remembered the taste of humility, the weight of silence, and the strength it gave him. The man kept speaking, louder now, pushing his words like fire. "You do not deserve this stage," he shouted, his voice echoing. "Your place is not here among leaders. You are only a product of luck, nothing more." The insult landed hard, and the cameras zoomed in to catch Sundar's face. Narendra Modi turned his head slightly toward Sundar. His eyes were steady, as if to say, "You do not need to fight with anger. Your strength is patience." Sundar took a deep breath. His voice, when it finally came, was soft, calm, and unshaken. "I grew up in a house where we had no refrigerator," Sundar began, his words clear. "I remember waiting for my father to bring home news of how much we could save each month. I remember studying under dim light, dreaming of a better tomorrow. And I stand here today not because I had everything, but because I learned to value respect, humility, and kindness even when the world gave me little." The hall fell silent again. Sundar's words did not rise in anger. They carried the weight of truth. He did not strike back at the man who insulted him. Instead, he revealed his story, his scars, and the resilience that shaped him. The man who had shouted was left frozen, unsure how to respond to such calmness. His anger looked small in front of Sundar's grace. The crowd began to clap, softly, at first, then louder. The applause filled the hall like a wave of respect. Narendra Modi nodded slowly. He knew what had just happened was more powerful than any prepared speech. Sundar had shown the strength of humility. He had turned humiliation into inspiration. Yet deep inside, Sundar felt a storm. His calm voice hid the weight of his past. He remembered the nights when he thought dreams were impossible, when his parents went without comfort so he could study, when people around him doubted his journey. Now, standing on the stage, he felt both the pain of those memories and the beauty of overcoming them. But this was only the beginning. What no one knew was that the man who had insulted Sundar had planned more. His goal was not just to shame him with words, but to trap him in a series of questions that could twist the truth. Sundar did not know what awaited him, but the hall was about to witness a battle of patience and character that would test his very soul. Narendra Modi shifted slightly in his seat, his silence strong like a shield. He was ready to stand beside Sundar, not with words, but with presence. Sometimes, silence itself carries power. The audience leaned forward. The cameras zoomed closer. Sundar looked out across the hall, his calm face hiding the storm inside. He knew this was only the first wave, and much more was coming. This was not just a story of humiliation. It was the story of how a man could face the deepest fire and still choose to answer with light. The storm behind calm eyes, the hall was still ringing with applause from Sundar's gentle words, but beneath the sound, there was tension that refused to leave. The man who had insulted Sundar was not finished. He adjusted his coat, leaned forward, and raised his voice again. His tone carried more challenge than before, sharper, like he wanted to corner Sundar into losing his calm. "You speak of respect and humility," the man said, his eyes locked on Sundar. "But do you not see the truth? You work for a company that controls voices, that decides what people should see and what they should not. Is that humility? Is that kindness? Or is that power hiding behind soft words?" The audience shifted. The question was direct, meant to trap Sundar. Some looked at Sundar with curiosity, others with doubt. A few even nodded at the man's accusation, wondering how Sundar would escape this. Sundar felt his chest tighten. For a moment he thought of remaining silent, but he knew silence could also be twisted. Then he remembered his father's words. When Sundar was young, his father once told him, "If you are ever tested, do not answer to win. Answer to stay, true to your soul." Truth does not need a loud voice. It only needs courage. Sundar lifted his eyes. His face showed no anger, no fear. He spoke slowly, so each word carried meaning. "I do not control what people believe," he said. "I am only a part of a journey where technology connects lives. It is not perfect. It is not free of mistakes. But my heart has always carried the same lesson I learned as a child, that every person, no matter where they are from, deserves to be heard, deserves respect. Humility is not about avoiding responsibility. Humility is about carrying it with honesty." His words spread across the hall like a calm wind. They were not polished lines from a script. They came from memory, from scars that still lived inside him. Narendra Modi, sitting beside Sundar, watched carefully. He understood that Sundar's strength was not in fighting with arguments, but in disarming anger with truth. Still, Modi knew. The man would not stop. The man leaned closer to the microphone, his voice rising. "Then tell us," he said, "have you never felt ashamed of where you came from? When you sat with powerful leaders, when you walked into rooms filled with wealth, did you not feel small? Did you not feel humiliated by your own past?" The words struck deep. Sundar's hands tightened slightly on the podium. He remembered the days when classmates mocked his simple clothes, when others laughed at his broken accent, when he was treated as less because he came from a modest home. The memories returned with sharp edges, almost painful. But then another memory came. The night his mother stayed awake to stitch his shirt so he could look neat for a school event. The way his father smiled when Sundar topped his exams. The quiet pride in their eyes. Humiliation was real, yes, but it had never defined him. What defined him was the dignity with which his parents lived, the love that filled their small house even when money was scarce. Sundar's eyes grew softer, and he answered with steady breath, "Yes, I have felt small. Yes, I have felt humiliated. But each time I carried that pain as a teacher, not a chain. I never wished to erase my past. I hold it close because it reminds me to walk gently, to never let pride blind me. The truth is, humility is not in never being humiliated. Humility is in rising above it with grace." The hall erupted in applause again, louder than before. People stood, clapping, moved by the honesty in his words. Some even wiped tears, touched by the picture of a boy who once lived with so little, and yet carried himself with so much strength. The man who had tried to break Sundar felt the ground shift beneath him. He had expected anger, shame, or retreat. Instead, Sundar's calmness turned every insult into a lesson. Narendra Modi leaned, slightly forward now. His eyes shone with quiet approval. He knew that Sundar's words had done more than defend himself. They had planted seeds of respect in the hearts of everyone watching. But what no one knew was that this was not only a public test. Behind the scenes, powerful figures were watching this event closely. Sundar's answers today would decide not just his respect, but also the trust placed in him for the future. And among those watching was someone who had already decided to challenge him further in ways far more personal and painful. As the applause settled, Sundar glanced toward the man again. He saw not just anger in those eyes, but also something else, envy. Sundar realized that this battle was not just about questions. It was about something deeper. The man's own wounds, his own insecurities, were pushing him to humiliate Sundar. For a moment, Sundar felt compassion even for the one who insulted him. He thought to himself, a person who spreads humiliation often carries it inside. The hall was waiting, the storm was still brewing, and Sundar knew the true test had only begun. The shadow of envy, the hall seemed calmer for a moment, yet beneath the applause there was a quiet storm waiting to rise again. Sundar stood steady, his face calm, but he could sense that the man who had attacked him was not done. There was a strange look in his eyes, not just anger, but something darker, something rooted in envy. The man's voice returned, colder now, quieter but sharper than before. You speak of humility. You speak of rising above pain. But humility is easy to show when you stand in the spotlight. Tell us, Sundar, when the cameras are gone, when no one is watching, are you still the same man you claim to be? Or is this only a mask to please the world? The audience froze. This was not just a question. It was an attempt to break Sundar's integrity. It was a suggestion that he lived two lives, one for the world and one hidden in shadows. Sundar's heart tightened. He thought back to his early days at Google, when he was just another engineer among thousands, when no one knew his name. He remembered the nights spent working silently on projects, the long hours away from family, the moments when he doubted if his work even mattered. There were no cameras then, no applause, no spotlight, only silence, mistakes, and perseverance. He lifted his eyes again. His voice was low but clear. Humility is not a mask. Humility is a habit. When I was a student in India, I stood in long lines just to make a single phone call for my studies. No one was watching me then, no cameras, no leaders, no applause. But I learned patience. I learned respect. I am the same person here that I was there. If my values change with the spotlight, then they were never real to begin with. The audience erupted into clapping once again, many nodding, many touched. Still, Sundar's calm reply did not silence the storm in the man's heart. The man leaned forward with a half-smile. And yet, he said, you stand beside leaders now. You share space with prime ministers and presidents. You speak of humility, but are you not proud of the power you carry? Are you not proud to be above others? Sundar hesitated, not because he was afraid, but because the question carried poison. Pride and humility were often confused, and the man knew it. Sundar let the silence last for a few seconds. Then he remembered his father again, sitting on the floor at night with a newspaper spread out, explaining small details about the world to his young son. His father's voice echoed in his memory. True greatness is never in being above others. It is in lifting others when you rise. Sundar raised his head, his voice firm. Power does not make me proud. What makes me proud is when a child in a small town can search for knowledge freely, when a student can learn without fear, when a person can connect with another across oceans. I do not see myself as above anyone. If I stand higher today, it is only so I can stretch my hand further to help others climb. Narendra Modi, who had been silent all this while, shifted slightly. His face carried a faint smile now, almost hidden but unmistakable. He saw in Sundar's words a reflection of values he himself had lived by. He knew the man beside him was not just defending himself, he was speaking a truth that could reach hearts everywhere. But just as the applause began again, a sudden interruption shook the hall. Another figure stood from the audience. This time it was not the same man, but someone else. An influential figure, known for his sharp criticism. His voice cut through the air. You speak well, Sundar, the second man said. But words are easy. Let us see how you stand when your own story is questioned. Is it true that in your early days, you were once rejected by those who thought you were not good enough? If so, why should the world believe in you now? The hall gasped. It was a direct attack, digging into Sundar's past failures. Cameras swung to capture every angle. Suspense grew heavy in the air. Sundar froze for a moment. Memories rushed back. Applications denied, interviews failed, projects that collapsed. He remembered the sting of rejection, the nights of doubt, when he wondered if he had chosen the wrong path. He remembered people laughing at him, saying he was dreaming too big. Those moments had cut deep, deeper than he had ever admitted. His chest rose and fell with slow breaths. Then he spoke, his voice carrying not just calmness, but raw honesty. Yes, I was rejected. Many times. I was told I was not good enough. I was told my dreams were too big for someone like me. Each rejection burned, but it did not end me. It shaped me. Rejection taught me resilience. It taught me that worth is not given by others. It is built by refusing to quit. I stand here not because I never failed, but because I never stopped after failing. The hall was silent, every ear listening, every heart moved. Some in the audience nodded with tears in their eyes, because they too carried memories of rejection. Narendra Modi's face grew firmer. He could sense the tide shifting. Sundar was no longer just answering questions. He was turning his wounds into bridges, connecting with everyone who had ever felt broken. Yet deep inside, Sundar knew this was far from over. Humiliation would not stop at words. The shadows of envy were gathering, and soon the challenges would strike harder than before. The breaking point of silence, the applause slowly faded, but the atmosphere inside the hall felt heavier than before. Sundar's words had touched hearts, yet they had also stirred deeper emotions among those who came not to listen, but to challenge. The man who had first humiliated Sundar leaned back now, his lips tight, his eyes cold. But the second man who had spoken about rejection was not finished. His presence grew sharper, as if he had prepared something more painful, something meant to pierce deeper than words about failure. He stepped closer to the microphone. "You tell us about resilience," he said, his tone slow and deliberate. "But is it not true that many people still believe you rose only because of luck? That if you were born elsewhere, you would not be standing here today? How do you answer to those who think you are not truly deserving, but only fortunate?" The audience held its breath. It was a cruel question, not just about Sundar's past, but about his very identity. Some heads turned to Narendra Modi as if expecting him to defend Sundar. But Modi remained still, his silence strong, his eyes fixed on Sundar. This was Sundar's battle to fight. Inside Sundar, the words cut deep. He remembered his first years in America, struggling to adapt, his accent mocked, his confidence shaken. He remembered standing in classrooms where others spoke boldly while he hesitated, unsure if he even belonged. He remembered the quiet walks back home, whispering to himself, "Do I really deserve to be here?" But then he remembered his mother's face, her simple but powerful words before he left home. "You are no less than anyone, Sundar. Do not measure yourself by where you were born. Measure yourself by how you rise when life tests you." Sundar raised his head, his eyes calm but glowing, with quiet fire. "Yes, I was fortunate," he said. "Fortunate to have parents who taught me respect. Fortunate to have teachers who guided me. But luck alone does not carry anyone to this stage. It was nights of hard work, years of doubt, countless failures, and the strength to keep moving forward. I am not ashamed of my fortune, but I am also not defined by it. I am defined by how I chose to use it, to build, not to break, to lift, not to push down." The hall responded with applause once again, louder, more unified. Many faces softened, their doubt replaced by admiration. Sundar's words reached them, not as defense, but as truth. Yet behind the applause, there was movement. A woman stood, now tall and composed, her voice sharper than the others. "You speak of lifting people," she said. "But what about those who feel left behind by the very technology you lead? What about the children who still cannot afford to learn? Who have no access to what others take for granted? Can you look them in the eye and say you have not failed them?" The hall grew quiet once more. This was different. This was not a personal insult. This was a deeper wound, a challenge that touched the very heart of Sundar's work. The question was heavy, and many in the audience nodded slowly, waiting for his answer. Sundar's throat tightened. He thought of the villages he had seen in India where children studied under dim lamps, where schools lacked even the most basic tools. He thought of his own childhood, waiting hours just to use a telephone. He knew the woman's words carried truth. He paused, letting the silence speak for him for a moment. Then his voice came, softer now, carrying weight. "I cannot say we have reached every child. I cannot say we have solved every pain. But I can say we have not stopped trying. I can say that every decision I make is shaped by the memory of those children, because I was once that child. I carry their faces in my mind every day, and I know the journey is not complete. But I also know that humility means accepting where we have fallen short, and courage means continuing the work, no matter how hard it seems." The silence that followed was different this time. It was not doubt. It was reflection. The woman lowered her gaze, her lips pressed together, as if his answer had reached a place she did not expect. Narendra Modi finally moved. He leaned forward, his deep voice breaking the silence. "True leadership is not in claiming perfection," he said, "but in admitting imperfection and still choosing to serve. Sundar has shown today that humility is not weakness, but strength." The hall erupted in applause, stronger than any before. People rose to their feet, clapping, cheering. Sundar's chest felt heavy, but not from pain. This time it was from the weight of gratitude, the sense that his struggles, his scars, had turned into something meaningful for others. But even as the applause filled the hall, Sundar sensed something else. He noticed the first man again, the one who had humiliated him in the beginning. His eyes were fixed on Sundar, darker now, filled with something unresolved. Sundar realized this battle was not over. Humiliation could return in many forms, and the hardest blows often came when least expected. When the wound is personal, the hall was alive with applause, but Sundar's heart felt the quiet shadow that refused to fade. The first man, the one who had begun with humiliation, had not spoken again. Yet his silence carried a darker weight than words. His eyes never left Sundar, and there was something in them, something more than anger, something personal. Sundar sensed it, but could not yet name it. As the noise of clapping softened, the man rose once more. His voice was lower now, steady, almost calm, but every word was heavy. "You speak of your father, your mother, your childhood. You speak of humility like it is your shield. But let us speak honestly, Sundar. Was there not a time when your own family felt you would never rise? When even those closest to you doubted your strength? Tell us, how did it feel when your own roots questioned your worth?" The hall gasped. It was no longer just an attack on Sundar's position or his company. This was personal. This was a knife directed at his very core, at his bond with the people who had built his foundation. Sundar froze. His chest tightened as memories he rarely shared returned. There had been moments, yes, moments when even his family feared he was chasing something impossible. His father once said, not out of doubt, but out of worry, "Maybe you should not go so far, maybe you should stay safe." His mother once cried softly when he left home, afraid that he might break under the weight of expectations. The memories were not cruel, but they were real. And now, dragged into the open, they carried the sting of humiliation. Sundar closed his eyes for a breath. When he opened them, He saw Narendra Modi's face, calm and firm, as if silently reminding him, "Do not answer in pain, answer in truth." His voice was steady when he spoke. "Yes," he said softly. "Even my family worried. Even they feared I would fail. But their doubt was not rejection. It was love. They doubted because they did not want me to be hurt. They did not want me to carry disappointment. And I do not see their fear as shame. I see it as proof of how deeply they cared for me." He paused, his eyes softening. Humiliation is not when the world doubts you. The deepest humiliation is when you stop believing in yourself. I never allowed that. My family gave me strength, even in their fear. They gave me the courage to prove to myself that I could rise. The audience grew silent, not because they rejected his words, but because they felt the weight of them. Many knew the truth of what he spoke. Family doubt was something almost everyone had tasted. Sundar's honesty connected with their own hidden wounds. The man's lips tightened. His attempt to break Sundar had instead opened a door into a truth that moved people. But he was not ready to stop. He leaned forward, his voice colder now. "And what about shame, Sundar? Do you not feel shame when people remember that you once lived in a house too small for dreams? Do you not feel shame when others remind you that you were once just a boy without wealth, without privilege? Tell us, does that not humiliate you even now when you stand here in front of the world?" The question struck deep. Sundar felt his stomach tighten, his breath heavy. Yes, he remembered the small house. He remembered cracked walls, dim lights, old furniture. He remembered neighbors who laughed at his family's simplicity. There had been shame at times, moments when he wished to hide those scars. But then, like a sudden light, he remembered his father's quiet smile, his mother's gentle strength, his brother's laughter, the warmth that lived in those walls despite their cracks. Shame was there, yes, but love was stronger. Sundar lifted his eyes. His voice was soft but carried power. "I do not feel shame for my past. I feel gratitude. The small house that you call humiliation was the place where I learned the meaning of respect. Those cracked walls held the love that built me. If someone feels shame for such roots, then they do not understand the true wealth of life. Wealth is not the size of the house. It is the size of the heart inside it." The hall broke into thunderous applause. People stood once again, clapping, cheering, their faces bright with emotion. Many wiped their eyes, touched by the picture of a boy who once lived with so little and yet carried himself with so much dignity. Narendra Modi finally spoke again, his voice deep and resonant. "Strength is not in hiding where you come from. Strength is in standing tall and saying, 'This is who I am, and this is how far I have come.' Sundar has shown us all that true greatness is built not on wealth, but on humility." The man who had tried to humiliate. Sundar lowered his gaze. For the first time, his confidence wavered. Yet Sundar sensed something else in his silence. This battle was not only about him. There was something hidden, something personal behind the man's relentless attacks. Envy was only part of it. There was another story waiting to surface, and Sundar knew it would strike soon. The hidden wound revealed. The hall was still echoing with applause, but Sundar's heart sensed that something deeper was unfolding. The first man, who had attacked him again and again, lowered his eyes for a moment. But when he lifted them, they burned with something rawer than anger. Envy was there, yes, but behind it, Sundar could now see pain. The man's voice returned, not loud this time, but heavy with bitterness. "You stand here and speak of respect, of humility, of kindness. But do you know what it feels like when life gives you nothing? Do you know what it feels like to work as hard as you can and still remain unseen while someone like you is lifted to the sky? You call your story an inspiration, but for some of us, it is a reminder of everything we never received." The words struck the hall like a sudden crack of thunder. People looked at each other, unsure how to react. The attack was no longer just about Sundar, it was about the man himself. Sundar's chest tightened. He saw it now. The humiliation thrown at him was not only about him. It was a mirror of the man's own wounds. The bitterness in his voice carried years of being overlooked, of being denied, of standing in shadows while others were celebrated. Narendra. Modi's eyes narrowed slightly. He understood as well. This was no longer a battle of arguments. It was a cry of pain disguised as insult. The man pressed on, his voice trembling now, not with rage, but with sorrow hidden behind sharpness. You talk about rejection as if it made you stronger. But some rejections do not shape us, Sundar. They break us. They leave us with nothing but silence. I stood where you once stood, with dreams in my heart. But I did not rise. I was forgotten. Tell me, Sundar, what would you say to me? Not to this hall, not to the world. To me, the man who could not climb the mountain you climbed. The hall was silent. The air felt heavy. Sundar's eyes softened as he looked at the man. For the first time, he did not see an enemy. He saw a reflection of himself, a reflection of what could have been if life had broken him instead of building him. He took a slow breath. I would say this, Sundar began, his voice gentle, almost like speaking to a friend. Your worth is not measured by where you stand today. Your worth is not lost because the world did not see you. I was lifted. Yes, but not because I was better than you. I was lifted because of moments, of choices, of chances that came my way. I cannot erase your pain, but I can tell you this. You are not unseen. Not here, not today. Your story matters, even if the world has not heard it yet. The man's face shook, his lips parting as if he wanted to speak but could not. His eyes glistened with something unspoken. Sundar stepped closer, his voice steady but warm. Humiliation cannot take away who you are. Envy cannot heal your wound. But respect for yourself, can begin to close it. I cannot change the past you lived, but I can stand here and say, you are not my enemy. You are my brother in the same struggle. The hall erupted. Not in applause at first, but in silence that carried weight. People felt the depth of Sundar's words. Then slowly, the clapping began, soft at first, then stronger, until the entire hall stood once again. Narendra. Modi's face showed quiet pride. He leaned slightly forward, his voice calm and powerful. When a man answers anger with peace, he wins hearts. But when he answers pain with compassion, he heals souls. Sundar has done both today. The man lowered his gaze, his hands trembling. The sharpness in his eyes melted into something else. Shame, yes, but also relief, as if a hidden burden had been touched for the first time. Yet Sundar knew this moment was not the end. Humiliation had turned into confession, but the journey of healing was long, and the hall, still filled with emotion, was about to witness one last turn, something no one expected, something that would test Sundar and everyone present in a way even deeper than before. The final trial of grace. The hall was heavy with silence after Sundar's words, and for a moment it seemed the storm had passed. But sometimes the hardest test arrives when the heart begins to rest. The man who had thrown humiliation at Sundar all along stood still, his eyes wet, his lips trembling. But just when the hall thought it was over, he lifted his head again. His voice came, soft but breaking, filled with pain. You speak of compassion, he said, but compassion cannot erase the years I lost. It cannot give me back the chances. That never came. Why should I believe in respect and humility when life has given me nothing but humiliation? The hall froze. It was no longer anger, it was despair, and despair is often louder than rage. Sundar's chest tightened. For a moment, he felt powerless. What could he say to a man whose wounds were so deep, whose soul carried so much bitterness? But then, he remembered the nights of his own despair, the times he almost gave up, the moments he felt invisible, the times rejection whispered that he was worthless. He remembered how his parents' simple words had lifted him, how kindness from strangers had given him strength. He took a deep breath and stepped closer to the man. His voice was steady, filled with warmth. "You are right," Sundar said. "Compassion cannot erase the past. Humility cannot change what was taken from you, but it can change what comes next. Life did not give you what you wanted, but life has not ended. The years you call wasted can still become seeds for tomorrow. You are not finished. Humiliation is not the end. It is a beginning, if you allow yourself to rise again." The man shook his head, tears slipping down his face. "But the world does not see me," he whispered. Sundar's eyes grew gentle. "Then let me say it here, in front of the world. I see you. I see your struggle, your pain, your worth. And if one man can see you, then the world can learn to see you too." The hall went silent again. This time it was not the silence of tension, but the silence of hearts moved beyond words. Narendra Modi finally stood, his voice rising with strength. "Humility is not weakness. It is the courage to accept pain and still offer respect. Sundar has shown us today that true strength is not in silencing humiliation, but in transforming it into dignity. And dignity is something no insult, no rejection, no envy can ever destroy." The hall erupted, louder than ever before. People rose to their feet, clapping, cheering, some crying openly. The man who had tried to humiliate Sundar lowered his head, tears flowing freely now. For the first time, his face carried no anger, no envy, only exhaustion and perhaps a small spark of release. Sundar felt his heart grow heavy and light at the same time. Heavy because he had faced the darkest wound of another soul, light because he had not answered it with pride, but with grace. He stepped back to the podium one last time. His voice carried across the hall, soft but unshakable. "I was once a boy who lived in a small house with cracked walls. I faced rejection, humiliation, and doubt. But I stand here today not because I never fell, but because I chose to rise. And I believe every person here, no matter how broken, carries that same power. Respect, humility, kindness. These are not just words. They are the light that can guide us when the world tries to humiliate us. And as long as we choose that light, we are never truly defeated." The applause shook the hall like thunder. Cameras flashed, reporters scribbled, voices cheered. But beneath it all, what remained was a silence inside every heart, a silence that carried truth. Narendra Modi placed a hand gently on Sundar's shoulder, a gesture of respect, of solidarity. The two men stood side by side, not as prime minister and CEO, not as leader and speaker, but as human beings who had faced pain and chosen dignity. And in that moment, the lesson was clear to all who watched. Humiliation may come, but grace has the power to turn it into hope.